At 6 in the morning, when most people in my neighborhood were still pouring their first cup of coffee, two men started pounding on my front door like they were serving a murder warrant. I opened the door in my bathrobe, half asleep, only to find them waving plastic badges and threatening to arrest me for putting up a fence on my own property. One of them snarled something about $2,500 cash only, while the other flicked a pair of toy-looking handcuffs like he'd practiced this routine in a mirror. I remember thinking in that exact moment, if these clowns only knew who they were threatening. Because beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief I'd been dragging behind me for months, I was still the same man who'd spent 15 years wearing a real badge chief of police over the very district these two idiots claimed to represent. And I was about to let them dig their own graves a little deeper. 3 months before that ridiculous scene, life felt quieter. Painful, but quiet. After losing my wife, Sarah, to cancer, the city felt like a prison made of old memories and unfinished conversations. Every siren reminded me of the job I couldn't do anymore. Every street reminded me of the moments we'd never get back. So I retired early, sold our townhouse, and moved into a modest ranch home in Oakshire Meadows, a sleepy HOA community with pretty lawns, quiet neighbors, and the illusion of normalcy. All I wanted was a place to breathe, to figure out who I was without the woman who'd held me together for 23 years. I built her a memorial garden in the sunniest corner of the backyard, somewhere the roses could soak in the morning light the way she loved to. The only ugly thing left back there was the old chain-link fence, rusted, bent, barely standing. So I replaced it with cedar panels, clean, warm, peaceful, something worthy of her memory. They cost me $1,200, and every penny felt like love well spent. Then she showed up, Delilah Thornfield, the HOA president, a woman who treated Oakshire Meadows like her personal kingdom and her white Escalade like Air Force One. She strutted down my driveway on stilettos, sharp enough to stab asphalt, dragging behind her a stack of HOA regulations thick enough to choke a horse. I could smell her perfume before she even spoke, some luxury fragrance so strong it should have come with a health warning. "Welcome to our little community," she purred, smiling like she'd just smelled blood in the water. "I'm Delilah, president of our HOA board. We need to talk about your unauthorized construction." She flipped through her binder like she was unveiling state secrets, then announced that my fence violated Section 12B of their aesthetic guidelines. I calmly handed her the written approval I'd received from a board member 3 weeks prior. She glanced at it like it was a dirty tissue. "Oh, sweetie," she said, dripping condescension. "Those approvals died with the old board. New leadership, new standards." The way she said sweetie made my eye twitch. But for the moment, I played along. That night, my neighbor Marcus, a retired electrician with hands like sandpaper and the patience of a man who'd seen too much HOA nonsense, showed up with a six-pack and a warning. He laid out the whole ugly truth. Delilah ran Oakshire Meadows like a shakedown operation. She targeted the elderly immigrants, single moms, anyone she thought was too scared or too uninformed to fight back. Mrs. Patterson, 70 years old, had already paid $8,000 in violations. A Korean family down the street had been cited for cultural disturbances because they placed traditional stones in their garden. A single mom named Sarah had been harassed daily until she paid a bogus fine for improper children's toy storage. And the muscle behind the operation, Delilah's husband, Vernon Ellis, a failed contractor who'd reinvented himself as some kind of HOA enforcer. Marcus described him perfectly. He's the guy who would lose a fight with a tape measure. I listened, something cold settling in my chest. Grief has a way of hollowing you out, but injustice, real injustice, has a way of lighting a fire in your bones. I didn't know it yet, but that fire was already starting to burn. The next morning, Delilah returned with a clipboard, a manila envelope, and Vernon skulking behind her like a poorly trained bodyguard. She slapped a violation notice against my chest, $500 up front, $50 a day, ongoing. "Your fence," she declared, "is an unauthorized aesthetic disruption." I watched Vernon measure my fence posts with trembling hands, the tape measure snapping back every time he lost his grip. I could have laughed, but something about Delilah's smug smile told me this wasn't amateur hour. They'd done this before, many times. You learn certain instincts in law enforcement. The way people lie, the way they bluff, the way criminals test boundaries before going all in. Delilah was poking, seeing how far she could go. And I let her, because the more rope she pulled, the more she'd eventually hang herself with. Then things escalated. First came the fake building inspector badge Vernon wore when he tried to force his way into my backyard. It glinted under the sunlight like something bought from a Halloween store clearance bin. He claimed HOA Compliance Authority allowed him full access to my property. I let him ramble while my security cameras recorded everything. Then came the letter from Thornfield and Associates Legal Services, typed on impressive letterhead with absolutely zero legal credentials to back it up. I ran the name through state databases, nothing. Totally fabricated. Then came the threats, the late-night notes, the intimidation visits, the fake engineering assessments, the property value disruption notices. Delilah was escalating because she thought fear would break me like it had broken everyone else. But I wasn't breaking, I was collecting. One night, Marcus connected me with a small group of residents who'd been quietly documenting their own abuse. We met in Mrs. Patterson's living room, the smell of lavender candles trying and failing to cover the scent of fear that had soaked into the carpet over the years. They showed me folders stuffed with letters, fines, photos of Vernon lurking around their homes late at night. Every page felt like a punch to the gut. That's when Vernon crossed a line I can never forgive. My security cameras caught him sneaking into my backyard with a homemade torch, some Frankenstein device of fuel-soaked cloth and metal scraps. He tried to set fire to my memorial fence, to the roses I planted for my wife, to the one place in this world where I still felt close to her. I confronted him, my voice shaking not from fear, but from the kind of rage that sits deep inside a grieving man. Vernon dropped the torch and ran. He left half the garden's scorched petals blackened and curling like dying wings. I sat in the dirt beside those burned roses, and for the first time since Sarah died, I felt myself breaking. Maybe I should move. Maybe I should leave these people to fight their own battles. Maybe Delilah was right. Maybe I didn't belong here. But grief and doubt have a way of leading you to unexpected clarity. 2 days later, Mrs. Patterson called me over. She handed me an old envelope her late husband Harold had hidden away. "He saved this," she whispered, "because he knew someday someone would need it." Inside were the original HOA covenants, and the bombshell no fine could legally exceed $50. Delilah's entire empire was built on lies, and Harold, God bless him, had tracked every suspicious transaction, every forged document, every unjust fine. His record stretched back years. He'd been fighting them quietly until the stress finally took him from this world. "He died because of them," she said, tears sliding down her face. "They killed him with paperwork." That was the moment everything snapped into place. This wasn't just harassment. This wasn't petty HOA nonsense. This was a criminal enterprise hiding behind clipboards and fake authority. And for the first time in months, a familiar version of myself, the investigator, the protector, the man who used to run entire precincts, woke back up. I contacted the state attorney's office first, then the FBI, then the postal inspectors. What I brought them wasn't some neighborhood squabble. It was racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, elder abuse, civil rights violations. The task force called it one of the cleanest HOA fraud cases they'd ever seen. We organized quietly. Marcus's garage became our war room. Neighbors rotated shifts, gathering evidence, translating documents, scanning everything Harold had saved. The teenagers volunteered to record everything for live stream backups. A single mom agreed to act as bait in case Delilah planned another bogus arrest. Then came the morning of the crackdown. Delilah planned what she called a community enforcement demonstration. She rolled in with her Escalade, her wannabe enforcers Vernon in full costume cop gear, and 2 hired thugs whose faces looked like they'd been carved from bad decisions and bar fights. But she didn't target me, not first. She marched straight to Mrs. Patterson's door, the one person least able to defend herself. She pounded with her fist, shouting into a bullhorn like a dictator announcing a public execution. "Dorothy Patterson," she declared, "you are under arrest for conspiracy against lawful community authority." Mrs. Patterson opened the door holding Harold's folder like a shield. Her voice shook, but her spine stayed straight. "You're the only criminal here, Delilah." That's when Vernon grabbed her arm. The metal of his fake handcuffs clicked around her fragile wrist. A sound like breaking glass filled the street, and that was the moment every door on Maple Street opened at once. Marcus stepped out, phone recording. Tom stepped out. The Martinez family stepped out, shouting in Spanish. Children peeked from behind their parents. 47 witnesses, 47 people who finally refused to be afraid. I stepped out last. Not in a bathrobe this time. In my full police chief uniform. Real badge, real authority, real law. Vernon Ellis. I called out, my voice echoing through the neighborhood. "You are under arrest for assault, false imprisonment, elder abuse, and impersonating a law enforcement officer." Delilah spun around, eyes wide, mascara dripping. "He's not a real cop. He's trying to interfere with HOA enforcement." That's when 3 unmarked SUVs rolled in. FBI, postal inspectors, sheriff's deputies. Agents stormed the scene with calm professional efficiency, the kind Delilah could only fantasize about. Agent Santos stepped forward, badge gleaming. "Delilah Thornfield, you are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, and civil rights violations." Vernon tried to run. He made it 3 steps before an agent tackled him. When they rolled him over, he'd wet himself. The entire street saw it. Delilah screamed about property values, screamed about authority, screamed about conspiracies. None of it mattered. The cuffs clicked. The cameras rolled. The reign of Oakshire Meadows' little tyrant ended right there on Mrs. Patterson's lawn. And as the agents drove them away, their fake badges glinting uselessly in the sunlight, I finally felt that quiet peace I'd been searching for since Sarah died. Sometimes justice doesn't come quickly. Sometimes it doesn't come cleanly. But when it finally arrives, it shines so bright it burns through every lie ever told to silence good people. And that's the story. If there's one lesson I learned through all of this, it's simple. Real authority protects fake authority exploits, and it only wins if we stay quiet.